What's up, everybody? We are back. John Delarose here, delarose.com. That's DELARROZ.com. Sign up for my newsletter in my description below and get a free graphic novel from me. If you like my reviews and my thoughts on comics, you're probably going to like my writing. And if you've checked that out, there are 27 full issues available on Amazon of my books, which I hope you'll check out also. Everybody who supports the channel, we really appreciate that here, and reading the books is the best way to support things around here. All right, The Incredible Hulk Going Gray. I've been reading a lot of Hulk lately, and so you're probably like, you just did a Hulk volume pretty recently. But that's because Marvel tends to come out with Hulk volumes in pairs. Usually for these epic collections, there's a sort of like early 70s one coming out, and then within a month there will be one that's in the 80s or 90s coming out. Now, they've done a lot of Peter David's Hulk going forward, and this is one that's a very interesting one to me because originally they came out with these things that were just thick trades. They weren't labeled epic collections, and it had Bill Mantlow's run on it, and there were 3 volumes of that, and it was around issue 300, and they did that. They had then they started Peter David's run of comics later on, and so you had this way to buy all the comics that weren't all epic collections to have almost everything in order. You could get those Bill Mantlo. There was a Hulk by John Byrne Visionaries, and then it was missing like 10 issues. And then it started the Peter David Visionaries line. And then once the Peter David Visionaries line ended, all the epic collections of Peter David filled in those gaps. So you could really read a lot of Hulk, except you were missing 10 issues. Well, this covers that John Byrne Visionaries volume plus those missing 10 issues. So you get everything that would have been missing at that point. And now with the omnibuses out there for Peter David volume 1 and 2, you can have an unbroken line of Hulk for at least, I think it's 150 plus issues at this point. You get Bill Mantlow's 3 books, you get this, you get Peter David's 2 omnibus volumes, and then you get the epics that come right after that. It's pretty awesome to be able to read this much of a comic book all in order like that. I'm stoked, and I haven't even gotten to the comic book yet. All right, it starts out with John Byrne's Hulk, and John Byrne is writing and drawing this. And it's fantastic. People always talk about how great Peter David's Hulk and all that, but honestly, I love reading this John Byrne bit. It starts out just like kind of some introduction. Samson comes back, who was introduced in Volume 5 of the Epic Collections. If you want to go back to that, he's a character who got dosed with gamma radiation, basically has been going after the Hulk ever since. Now, where we're at here is the Hulk is kind of seeing things in the first issue. Kind of an odd one. And then we get an introduction to the creative team. Now, as this goes along, the Hulk gets separated from Bruce Banner. This is the annual. Sorry, not yet. The annual has its own deal. Sal Buscema actually does the art here, and I love Sal Buscema's art. He is so dynamic. This is just pure Marvel look. John Byrne wrote this one. The Hulk gets captured by this guy who is, like, I guess, dying and wants to, get that gamma radiation for himself. And he's large and in charge here. And there's a woman who's kind of, like, sad about the creature experimentation going on. But she kind of goes along with it because she's in love with somebody else who's in there. Just so well written, so well drawn. This annual is one of the better annuals of any Marvel comic I've ever read. And I don't like most annuals. This is a classic Sal Buscema. He does this very worried look on his characters from time to time, and you can tell he's got that vibe here. You can also see the way his arms are drawn. Like the Buscema brothers did this sort of like muscular arm way of doing things with these like cross shadings in the middle of things, where very distinct. And because the guy's large and in charge, ooh, that's an ugly drawing. I love it. His fat makes him into a fat Hulk instead of a muscular Hulk. I don't know if you could make this story in 2021 without people going crazy, but it was very funny to me. So getting back to it, here we are. John Byrne is, of course, notorious for his She-Hulk run, which is the best. If you haven't read that, go get that. And she shows up to deal with things here as the Hulk has escaped, and Bruce Banner is now separated from the Hulk as a person. And here he is. He's Bruce Banner. And he's got his own Hulk busting team going after this Hulk, who's even more mindless and even more dangerous than before. And I love John Byrne's art. You either like John Byrne's art or you don't, but I think he does a wonderful job. He introduces this character who's a reporter who continues on, and she's kind of trying to cover things and just kind of gets in the way a lot of the time. And Byrne has his Hulkbuster group here, who then ends up getting into trouble a little bit more than not. And the big development here on sort of the character level, and I'm trying to go fast because I spent so much time at the beginning just setting up what's going on in this, is that Bruce Banner asks Betty to marry him. Now that's left as a cliffhanger, and we don't know what happens here at the beginning, as we just have these Hulk battles with the Hulkbusters going on in the background. At the end of it, she finally says yes. And then we get the wedding issue. And I've read these before. Just beautiful stuff. I love it. There's Rick Jones, Betty. Everybody's kind of shocked looking at the cover, and you'll find out why in a second. Now, this is an interesting... I forget what the inking situation was on this, because this is a very weird panel. And it doesn't look like the typical John Byrne look. So I don't know what happened there. Did somebody else ink this? Yeah, Keith Williams did background inks, so that's interesting. Okay. You can tell the inkers like add a lot to different things here, and I guess, I don't know, Byrne maybe was getting a little rushed on this this issue here. So we get the little wedding issue. The Hulk's off fighting Samson elsewhere. There's Betty in like a very traditional wedding garb. And General Ross gets really upset and shoots Rick Jones in the process of this. But they end up getting married anyway. So very, very odd little wedding issue. General Ross is kind of in a state where he's going absolutely crazy at this point. And it's really sad to watch his character through this. It's just like painful because he's really lost everything. And now he's losing Betty to Bruce Banner. And oddly, we get Marvel Fanfare. Now this is a side Hulk thing, and Byrne did a entire issue just in splash pages. So really nice little thing. If I was reading Marvel Age, I'd really enjoy this. I love the looks of all this. Beautiful art. It's kind of like a in Hulk's mind kind of thing where, you know, he thinks he had a friend and he really didn't, and Hulk ends up really lonely. Very nice issue also. So the wedding issue is very memorable. That issue is very memorable. I really enjoyed Byrne's run. But then oddly, John Byrne stops, and you are not reading John Byrne anymore as of issue 320. So that whole section was included in that John Byrne Visionaries, and is a wonderful run of the Hulk. I'm just sad it didn't keep going. I would have liked to see him probably, you know, finish this out, because as much as this is all right, it was a little better on the Byrne era, and it starts to kind of go downhill a little bit from here. Al Milgram takes over on story and layouts, and then has some different people do finished art all on the way here. Now, Al Milgram is known as one of Marvel's like stalwart inkers. He's usually the one doing the finishes on a lot of people's arts. I can't really think of any other stories I read by him on the writing end, so it's very interesting that he took this over at this point. I don't know if this was a tryout on that level or if he'd already been doing it, but again, he's just one of Marvel's inkers in general, and this is very different. Now, it kind of stagnates the storyline a little bit, and as you can tell, the layouts just aren't quite as dynamic. The figure finishes really just aren't quite as dynamic as Byrne. You know, Betty's just not as pretty. It really just is down quite a bit. And so does the storyline, to be honest. Hulk is still separated from Bruce Banner, who's kind of getting sick at this point, because it turns out that it's making him sick to be detached from his Hulk personality. They try to go on a vacation, and when they're on vacation, bad things happen, and they're forced to come back, Betty and Bruce. And everybody's kind of just mad and trying to take down the Hulk. S.H.I.E.L.D. gets involved, and we've got a character, Quartermain, who's just kind of over the line. You kind of get the vibe that like he's being shady throughout these things here. And yeah, just, I mean, you can see that the art just really like turns into a blandness from where it was. You get some very weird poses here too. Look at this Captain America That looks like it hurts. Looks like a broken neck and a strange arm there. So next panel is a weird pose too. But Al Milgram's really good at inks. I just, I don't know. This just didn't work out that well. It was okay though. I mean, all the Hulk stories, it's the Avengers versus the Hulk, and it's dragged out for a little too long. You get several issues of them fighting the Hulk in the desert, and Doc Samson fighting the Hulk, and everybody worried that Bruce Banner is going to turn back into things, but Bruce is really just dying because of his separation with the Hulk. Eventually, the Hulk just becomes weaker because he's dying because of the separation of Bruce Banner, and in this 324, they finally merge them back together. This is a really funky one. I actually really liked this. As far as I mentioned the art being weird before, this is still weird, but Bruce Banner like trying to pop out of the Hulk like inside his body is just a very creepy, cool thing. You get some nice machinery here too, so it's not all bad. Enjoyable stuff. We get an annual. I loved this annual. This is written by Danny Fingeroth and again Sal Buscema on the art. I think just when Sal Buscema gets involved, it just adds a level of professionalism to it. You can see just like the angles here from this perspective shot, that it is just like a cut above these like, sort of straightforward, right on. It just makes it a lot more dynamic. The faces are a lot more expressive. There's more detail to it. It's just good stuff. So in this one, the Abomination comes back to Earth. I guess he's been dead for a while, and he's been taken over in his head by another bad guy. And so it's somebody controlling the Abomination, who then fights Grey Hulk as Rick Jones and Betty get in the middle of things and get into danger. Really good annual. Both the annuals in here were just phenomenal. So good stuff. So we're back to it, and Al Milgram's here, and now we've got a different inker involved, and I guess Al Milgram's credited, I guess, more with the pencils here, and this looks a little bit better than those first couple issues, so I'm glad they kind of shifted things up here. But the storyline kind of just keeps meandering with this shield thing, with the Hulk, and then you learn that there's a new Hulk, and you see he's got, some nice 80s hair there. And surprise, surprise, it ends up being Rick Jones. I guess Rick Jones got caught in a little contraption when they were being merged back together, and Rick Jones now is also a Hulk. This is a really nice, different inker again. And it's not said how it's really laid out. Again, in this one, it's not... Marvel credits things weird sometimes, and this one doesn't say pencils, inks. This one just has this storyline by, and it's got all the people. But these are some really cool looking pages here where they got these like background or backstory panels. Looks really nice. General Ross gets taken over by a alien being who then tries to kill both the Hulks. And we're just kind of set in the same spot. We got the Hulkbusters doing their things. They're all going after the Hulk. Everybody thinks Banner's involved somehow, and Banner is, but he's not actually the Hulk. He's just chasing after Rick. And we get this is a weird issue. I think this is Peter David's issue. Yeah. Okay. So Al Milgram takes an issue off here, and we get Peter David with Dwayne Turner. I don't know if this is like they're sort of introducing people slowly to Peter David coming on, but big different tone. Peter David's writing is very introspective compared to the others, and this is a really nice issue. It's basically just Bruce Banner dealing with his own psychological things, it turns out. So, very strange departure from a very, I guess, milquetoast Hulk run. Otherwise, when you get back into it, and we get different finished art by a different person here. So it looks a little bit different again towards the end of it. But we're in 329 to 330. This is the end of Al Milgram's run. They kind of start to wrap things up here as everybody kind of finds out who the Hulk is. There's these strange creatures who got caught in the Gamma Blast as animals, and I guess they're actual creatures here. Rick Jones, Hulk, becomes friends with them for a bit, but then they realize he's too dangerous and kind of kick him out at the end of this. And, of course, when they get back, they kind of like have the big climax at this point where some creature is taking over everybody's heads here. General Ross ends up putting a stop to it to try to save Betty, and he dies. So very, very odd ending here. He doesn't actually. He comes back later, of course. But look at how ancient he looks here compared to other different points in the comic. So very odd little run by Al Milgram. It's pretty good. I know I knocked it a little bit, but I knocked it in comparison to, I guess, John Byrne coming before and Peter David coming after. Right? It's a very different thing. It's very much feels like a stalled plot for a little bit that just dragged out a little bit too long. Like you could have accomplished some of those things in probably half the issues and then moved on to a different plot. The art also on that level is just a little, like I said, the panels were kind of straightforward. They were a little bland compared to Byrne, and it just was what it was. Now, the Byrne stuff is so good. I just plowed through that in one day. I thought it was amazing. The annuals were fantastic. So this volume is very much worth reading for any Hulk fan. There's a lot of character development through here. Of course, a lot of it gets undone later because that's how Marvel Comics works. But, this is really solid stuff overall. I think I'd call this an 8 out of 10 because it was dragged down a little bit by the Milgram portions of this, but I am glad I read those. I don't think I would want to have skipped those at the same time. All right, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll be back soon.